Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of COVID-19 Storytime with Rob. So, just a brief background, real quick. I was trying to think of ways to help some friends of ours who are elderly, seniors who are kind of locked up in their houses, and we're not really supposed to go over and visit with them. So, I thought, what would be more cool than to just have story time with seniors or whoever wants to hear a good story. So these are very short stories, and I just wanted to share them so that I could send them to you to watch and enjoy as much as I do. So the first story that we're going to start with today comes from Paul Harvey, the rest of the story, which many of you I know will know exactly what that is about. I remember growing up as a kid, we used to go on hunting and fishing trips, and I remember driving in the dark, going to a certain destination, either early in the morning or late at night, and Paul Harvey would come on and he would say the rest of the story, and you were just glued to the radio, and you couldn't wait to see what came next. And so I want to share some of those with you, and hopefully you'll enjoy them just as much as I do. Our first story today is called The Mysterious Benefactor. Once upon a time, in the gentle foothills of America's Ozark Mountains, there lived a widow. Her home was a humble farm cabin, which she shared with her husband. But now she was alone in the world. One morning, the hour of noon, 3 men rode on horseback in front of her farmyard. One of the men dismounted, knocked on the cabin door. He explained to the widow that he and his friends were weary travelers, far from home, hungry and hankering for a hot home-cooked meal. Would it be too much to trouble you? That is, would she mind cooking such a meal for them? The widow was reticent at first. Still, the strangers did appear hungry, and they were very polite. So she explained that there was not much food in the cabin, but they were welcome to what food she did have. The men expressed their gratitude, and once inside the cabin, they were even more deeply touched by the widow's generosity. For you see, it was obvious she was painfully poor. The little evidences of her lonely struggle to survive were everywhere. The meager furnishings, the supply cabinets were mostly empty. One of the travelers noticed a tear on the widow's cheek and asked what was the matter. She replied that no one but she had eaten at that table since her husband's death. And now, having men in the cabin again, well, it just reminded her of happier times. There was something else, and at this point the widow began to sob. After 4 o'clock that very afternoon, she would be without a home. In less than 4 hours, the man who held the mortgage to her farm would come to foreclose. $800 remained on the mortgage, 100 times more than she could ever afford to pay. The travelers stared at each other in icy, ashamed silence. How could they have imposed upon a woman who was already heaped with such burdens? When they finished their meal and had thanked the widow for her hospitality, the shadows of mid-afternoon were yawning in the farmyard. Then one of the men clasped the widow's hand in parting. "You remind me so much of my own mother," he said. Into her other hand he gently placed a roll of bills, American currency. $800. When that man comes for his money, you get a receipt now. Those were the last words the stranger spoke to her as he mounted his horse and rode off. The widow watched him, smiling through the incredulous, joyous tears, as he and his fellow travelers rode off down the dusty country road. The story you have just read, that of the widow's mortgage and the generous stranger, occurred in the late 1870s in the foothills of the Ozark Mountains. It is believed that single incident provided the factual basis for the scores of similar yet untrue stories that blossomed in its wake. So as far as we know, it really happened only once. And this is the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would always say. When the fellow who had held the mortgage on the widow's farm had departed the property with money in hand, paid in full, carrying with him the mortgage money, he was then robbed on the county road in the woods nearby. He was robbed of all the money on his person by the very same person who had given the widow the money. You see, the traveler, the stranger, the mysterious benefactor was none other than Jesse James. And now you know the rest of the story. Thanks for joining me today, and enjoy the rest of your day, and please be safe.